Bipolar Unfiltered, Hope, Humor, and Hard Truths with Gabe Howard. What if we stopped whispering about bipolar disorder and started talking about it openly, with humor and honestly? Welcome to Bipolar Talk, the podcast when we turn our bipolarity into an opportunity. I'm Clément Bessard, founder of Upstage and Bipolar Type 2. Today I'm joined with Gabe Howard, award-winning speaker, author of Mental Illness, is an asshole, and host of S-Line, Inside Bipolar and Inside Mental Health podcasts. He was diagnosed with bipolar and anxiety disorder in 2003, and Gabe has turned his journey into a mission to educate, advocate, and bring humor into serious conversation about mental health. And can you just present yourself, Gabe?
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. So, I mean, you hit all the high points. I live with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with bipolar one, many years ago. After I spent some time in a psychiatric hospital, and it was very difficult. And when I reached recovery, when I got better, when I got well, I realized that there was just so much I didn't know, and I wanted to make it better for the next person. And I didn't know it would become a career. I started off like volunteering and helping and just being a little outspoken, and it just sort of grew from there. So that's who I am. But you hit all the high points. You hit all the high points.
Yeah, so maybe it's important to explain a little bit your journey because what I was wondering when I got diagnosed and what we're all wondering is like, how do you find your path to stability, kind of? And can you tell us a little bit like what worked for you?
Yeah, so the first thing is that the key words there are what worked for me. And I always point that out for a couple of reasons. One, I was diagnosed 25 years ago, so the world has changed dramatically. The route that I took is no longer available. We have, better medications, we have better therapy, we have better understanding. I like to point out to people that, I was diagnosed before influencer culture. I was diagnosed before Instagram. There was Facebook and Twitter, but barely. And so the world was just very different. But the path that I took was confusion, terror, hopelessness. It was a really kind of crummy path, and it's one of the reasons I became an advocate because I just thought, man, if I had a little knowledge, it would have helped me tremendously. But from like a medical perspective, medication was very beneficial for me. Therapy was very beneficial to me. Peer support, like support groups and being around other people who were managing mental health issues was very important to me. And finally, and I don't think that it can be understated, and it's often not talked about in these conversations, but education. When I realized exactly what bipolar disorder was and what bipolar disorder is not. Because I'll be the first to admit, when I was diagnosed with a severe and persistent mental illness, I thought my life was over. I thought I needed to live in a group home. I thought I was going to be institutionalized because I couldn't think of anyone living well with any mental illness. Every story that I knew about mental illness was a tragic one. So, therefore, when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I assumed that my story would also be a tragic one. And I moved into advocacy for no other reason than to disavow people of that notion. Because, I'm not saying that my life is perfect, but I am saying that it is not the horror show that I expected it to be.
Yeah, I feel it was a bit the same thing for me. I can relate because I think in France we were a little bit late, to be honest. We have a different health system, but the fact that you didn't have as much like education and feeling hope at the end, it's exactly what you're saying. Is like showing it's possible to work full time, to have a great life, and I think I feel the same. It's really important. And if you're listening, like you could be in a tough spot. Like you could be depressed and you can have like, I don't know, you lost something. And I think we've both been there. And I think it could be interesting to explain a little bit like what we did did we do to move forward? And maybe with like real life example, I can, for example, share that I was depressed, smoking weed when I was like 20, and I thought like I would stay depressed, and I didn't know either way out. And at the end, here I am. Like what helped me the most, I think, at the time was changing environment. If you feel depressed, was for me to live with my parents for a few months, to not live alone. I think it's maybe something I wanted to share, that maybe my luck at the time. But if can you tell us a little bit about what was your last depressive episode, and how did you find a way out actually?
So my last depressive episode was a couple of years ago. Pretty recent, and it lasted about a year. I've as much as I hate to say it, it's great for storytelling, but terrible to live through. But it kind of came on out of nowhere. In hindsight, it didn't. But I had been managing successfully for years. I had ups and downs. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that I never had like a couple of bad days or even a couple of bad weeks, but it always it always subsided relatively quickly. I had great coping skills. I had good support system. I had good routines. I had good doctors, good medicine, good therapists. So I felt like the ebb and flow was always good, but one day it kept getting worse and worse, and I thought it was the same pattern as always. And before I knew it, I hit a brick wall. And what happened was a guy I know. He works at the local fast food restaurant where I go every morning. And I just he followed me out to my car. And I don't want to say that he's not a friend, because that's kind of, but I only know him in the context of I buy food from him. You know what I mean? He's never been to my house. He's not like my BFF. He's not my family. He's a good guy, and I've known him for years. But our relationship is not what I would call like like intimate or friendship, or it's we're friendly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But he followed me out to my car. And and I got in the car, and he said, "Hey, are you okay?" And just that moment, with that question, I was like, "No, no, I'm not. I'm not okay." And I said, I don't know. That's what I said. And he's like, If you need anything, let me know." He's like, You're important." And I was like, well, thank you." But that was enough. He sort of broke the barrier to when I realized I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble here. And then I started really reaching out to people and asking for help. And the way that I got out of it is, first I I tell audiences whenever I can, this is not quick. It took me a year to get out of it. Now there was ups and downs and back and forth, and there was some success and there was some failures. I'm not saying that I was exactly the same for a year and then suddenly everything was perfect. It's like a roller coaster, right? But so many people are like, "Oh, you discovered you were depressed and you called your doctor and then you were fine?" No. No, that's nonsense. That's not how any of this works. But people think that it works that way because of portrayals on television. And we just believe that there's like magic pills that take all the pain away. And it doesn't work that way. It took me a long time to re-find that stability. And honestly, even as I'm sitting here now, I still have some kind of lasting effects from it, which I recognize is not the depression. It's more the trauma of having gone through the depression. But sometimes I look around and I'm like, how did this happen to me? And there's an arrogance in that statement. How did this happen to me? Like what? I'm so special? But I sort of felt like I was. I felt like I was special. I felt like I knew what I was doing. I knew the warning signs. I had all the right people around me, so I was protected. And unfortunately, that arrogance. I'm just gonna be straight with you. That arrogance could have really cost me a lot. I'm really lucky that it only cost me a year. I'm really lucky that it only cost me, hard work and therapy and a rededication to the things that work. I'm really lucky that it wasn't worse. But the I am starkly reminded of the fact that none of us are special in this fight. We want to believe that we are because we're doing the right things and that makes us feel safe and protected. But the reality is it can happen at any time and we must remain vigilant. And the minute we get complacent, that's when it can strike. And that's as direct and as honest and as vulnerable as I can be. I don't want to admit that I had an ego. I don't want to admit that I thought I was special. It's kind of embarrassing. I like to think of myself as a pretty humble guy, but no, no, I got too big for my britches and bipolar smacked me down.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder for myself too. And if you're listening, if you're stable, it may be for you too, because of when we are stable for a few years, we start to feel like, yeah, it's fine. It's not gonna come back. Like I know what I'm doing. I'm not drinking anymore. I'm not smoking anymore. I have my doctor. I'm taking my pills. But yeah, it's a tough thing. Is like it can come back, and yeah, it's a bit scary. And what you explained, Gabe, is probably the most important for me too. Is to be able to say that we're vulnerable and we need help and we need to ask for help. And even with everything we've done in the past, everything that we put in place, at some point, if we don't reach for help and if we don't accept that we're vulnerable, we will probably relapse. So, and it takes courage to be vulnerable. I think and for men, it's also a bit different because we were taught that we have to be strong and tough and, and manage it ourselves. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that because I feel that men for us sometimes even harder to do it. So what is your trick to feel and to show your vulnerability?
I think one of the things that you describe is this idea that men, and I think it is getting better. I want to say, for the audience listening, I am decidedly middle aged. I am well past 40. Yeah, I feel I still feel young and relevant, but I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not even 30 anymore. And the thing that I think about the most is what I was taught when I was young, which is, to be tough, to be strong, to be, aggressive and to protect the people around me and to fight hard and to hustle and to work. And, uh, and I'm not saying, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying that these are terrible lessons. I'm saying they're incomplete, right? Because no matter how hard you try, you can't fight your way out of all situations. And even with masculinity, we are aware of this, right? None of us none of us try to, treat medical issues if our buddy like gets hurt playing football, right? Like we're all manly men and we're all playing football and he gets tackled and he can't get up and the bone is sticking out. Nobody says walk it off. We call a doctor, right? But yet when it comes to our mental health and our emotional health, people are like, man, I can't get out of bed. And we're like, wuss, get up, like fight harder. We do need to fight, but we also need medical care. We also need support. We also need validation. We also need understanding. And for some reason, for many men still today, and for many men my age and older, that somehow got rebranded as like being weak. But I gotta tell you, there is some enormous strength and frankly some amazing, machoism in saying I need help and accepting it because you want to live your best life. Here's the reality. Men all over the world are like, well, I'm tough and I'm strong and I don't need anybody. Right, because you're afraid to ask for help. Just own it. You're afraid to owe somebody a favor. You're afraid to hear hard truths about yourself. You're afraid to admit that you're vulnerable. Actually, by refusing the help, you're kind of a wuss. You're just too weak to let people help you lead a better life. And when you think about it that way, it's actually super strong to say, you're right, I can't do this on my own. And then have people tell you things that you don't want to hear. It's hard to hear this stuff. I don't want to hear about my emotions. I don't want to admit that I cry. I don't want to hear that I'm weak. That's really hard. But being able to hear it and to fight through it and to get better. And then my favorite part, help other people do that. I think that is significantly stronger than sitting at home pretending that everything is okay. I know that I do not own masculinity, and there are so many men that are like, no, that's bullshit. And those men can sit around and suffer and believe that they are strong. But you know what? I got off my ass and did something about it, and I'm better. And now I get off my ass and help other people get off their ass. But that's fine. You're sitting at home tough. In the meantime, I'm out here doing stuff. And that's really the message that I want men to hear if they feel that it's weakness to ask for help. I'm in the war fighting. You're at home quitting. But if you want to believe that makes you tough, then, Godspeed. I can't change your mind.
And you'll be surprised, like, people love to help. It's something that I discovered over the year. Like, you can reach to most people, and if you show really like something you believe, your mission and your vulnerability, people will actually help. Like, I reached to Gab. He have no reason to help me, but then it just like did, because it's what people do. And I feel like as bipolar, it can be your superpower. I think it's part of my superpower is to be able to ask for help when something get wrong. And I feel happier for sure. And then I'm capable of helping other, which is like really cool. So to to go back, because you learn a lot. You interview hundreds of experts, of people with lived experience. And what truly changed the way you see bipolarity? Like, what are the things you were like, what what is going on?
I, 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 I think that the thing for me is, at first, when I was first diagnosed, you're at least for me, right? And again, you got to go back like 25 years. I really believe that bipolar disorder was kind of like one size fits all, right? I mean, and that's sort of how it's, brought to like here's the definition of bipolar disorder. Here are the symptoms that people have, right? And I really approached it in the early days that we were all kind of the same, right? I mean, it's like, and I should have known that was nonsense, but I didn't. I was very new, and I started to learn in support groups that like, everybody's got kind of like a different flavor, a different feel, a different experience, different resiliency levels, different symptoms, right? But when I really started interviewing people and really, creating space to hear not only personal stories, but also expert medical research and advice, I realized that, wow, this is every single person is different. We all have some things in common. I'm not saying that we're not bonded by, a set of symptoms or a diagnosis. I mean, I think we have some relatable experiences, but a relatable experience and identical are vastly different. I mean, parents have relatable experiences, but we all know that every household and every parent is different. And if somebody said no, all moms are exactly the same, you'd be like, "What are you, an idiot? That doesn't make any sense. That all dads are the same. No, what are you, dumb? But all bipolars are the same. Well, that makes perfect sense. I no, no. I when I started learning that, it really opened up like a massive avenue for me, because now all of a sudden it's like, wow, this literally means that there is an infinite amount of knowledge. There is an infinite amount of experiences. There is an infinite amount of coping skills, stories. And this changed my perspective and advocacy, because when you've got an infinite amount, it means you should never give up. You've got to keep trying, because somebody out there has been where you are. Somebody out there knows the way, and you just got to find them. And that can be a harrowing uphill battle, right? It's a war. Nobody's pretending it's not a war. But once I learned it was a winnable one, I got to tell you, it put a little extra spring in my step. And I would say that is probably the biggest lesson. I listen, like from a geek standpoint, hearing about new treatments, hearing about new research, hearing about, DNA mapping to try to figure out the genetic markers that I do kind of geek out a little bit on it, right? I mean, but I do remind I'm not a doctor, so it's all science fiction and fascinating to me. And I don't know that in my lifetime we'll have a definitive test for serious and persistent mental illness like bipolar disorder, but I really feel encouraged with the research that's happening that, someday, they'll be able to draw a little bit of blood, smear it on a little card, and if it turns purple, you got bipolar. Then we'd be able to find it quicker, treat it easier. I mean, I think of pink eye all the time, right? Pink eye is this annoying illness that when you get it, you think, well, shit, now I got to put drops in my eyes. Pink eye used to cause blindness. Pink eye, if you got pink eye before antibiotics, you had a decent chance of losing your sight. And now the whole world sees it as an annoying inconvenience. And that's medical science. So I do have a hope. And I look forward to the day that it's like, oh, you have bipolar disorder? Well, you just need to put these drops in your eyes and you'll be just fine. And everybody's like, God, that's annoying. Yeah, it's fine. I I I I I I do have a lot of hope that that's coming. It's going to take a while. I don't want anybody to think it's around the corner, but seeing some of that frontline research it's a fun part of my job.
Yeah, and I think hope is the main thing. It's like there's so many things going on. Personally, I still feel like it's slow, to be honest. Like when I see like the stake here for us, because when you are into this depression and you're like, people are talking about, oh, maybe in 10 years we'll get that. You're like, it's too far away, but we have to think about the next generation, and we have to think that maybe we'll have the same problem actually in 10 years too. So it's really about belief, I would say. And and maybe I wanted to ask about building your system, because I think you explained it well. So it's like, for example, I would say your Gabe bipolar type Gabe, type 1 maybe, and
Mhm.
I'm bipolar type Clément type 2, and we're unique. So everybody has their own thing. And I feel like it's really, if you're listening, like, how can I build my system that works for me, that prevent most of the relapse? Because sometimes it's just bad luck. You have to say it. It's a chemical problem. But how would you explain to people how to build their own system?
So the way that I look at it is I sort of use a sports analogy, right? The first thing is imagine that you are the coach, right? Like I think that's a good analogy. So many people trying to build a support system, they look at themselves as a player, and I think it's better if they look at themselves as a coach, right? So you are coaching your support system. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is your support system, they have free will, right? If you're a coach, you can tell your players what to do, but they've got to make decisions in the moment, and you've got to decide what kind of coach you are. Some coaches are, I told you to shoot that ball and you didn't, you suck, right? And they start yelling and throwing chairs, right? Other coaches are like, hey, I told you to throw the ball. What went on there? What made you decide not to follow the instruction? And they're like, yeah, the dude had his hand up and I knew it was going to hit it, and then I saw Mark in the corner of my eye, and I knew that if I passed it. He's like, "That's good. That's you wow, okay, I didn't think of that. You're right. Mark was open. All right. That's good." And then they learn and they work together. I recommend the second type. I want to be clear. I recommend that type, where when your support system lets you down, you coach them. Hey, why did you decide? And then maybe say, well, I saw that Mark was open and he has a better shot than me. Well, right, I understand that, but I wanted you to take the shot. I knew Mark would be open. I'm the coach, but I still wanted you to take the shot because I knew that you had a better shot. You seem to lack some confidence in this area, and I needed you to take the shot. Also, they were covering Mark, and notice that when you pass the ball to Mark, Mark does have a better shot than you. And the other team's aware of it as well and notice they blocked the ball because they were expecting it. They weren't expecting you to shoot. You would have caught them off guard. And I know that Mark has a better shot, but you recognize that you're both excellent players. Just because Mark is better doesn't mean you're bad. And that's where the coaching comes in, right? And the next thing is, so many people are like, well, I have a support system. I have my spouse. Or I have a support system. I have my best friend. Or I have a support system. And they name one person. Yeah, that's great. I'm not saying that one person isn't super valuable. And they can be the MVP, like they can be the top, but could you imagine if you showed up at the Olympics and like, I've got a basketball team, it's my buddy Mark. Well, what about everybody else? Nope, just Mark. You don't have a whole team? Nope, I got Mark. You're woefully underprepared and you're going to get stomped. The reality is look, I have an MVP, right? I know who my MVP support system is, the person that I go to 9 times out of 10. But listen, I said 9 times out of 10 on purpose because every now and again, I need support that she can't help me with. It, sometimes I need support because of her. Like, what if we get in a disagreement? What if we get in an argument? What if this person is unavailable? Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I don't know how many analogies I can switch to in this story, but sincerely, you need to build a support system. You need to have your rational friend. You need to have your listening friend. You need to have your go off the rails and just scream from the rooftop friends. Build a support team and coach them. And I want to end on this. When I say coach them, I don't mean chastise them. I don't mean yell at them. I don't mean tell them that they suck. So often it's like, I need support and you didn't help me. Why didn't you help me? Nobody cares. Look, I know it feels that way. I'm not even denying. I have done that, and I'm probably going to do it again. But I can tell you, it's never once worked. Never once have I gone off on somebody screaming at them that they're not supporting me and they've immediately started to support me. No, they get defensive. They get their feelings hurt. They get upset. And now I have two problems. Now I'm not getting the support that I need, and I've upset somebody who I love and who I genuinely believe can help me. So that's a really important person in my life. If I'm mad at them for not helping me, it means that I respect them enough to help me. So take a deep breath, count to 10, make your amends, and let them know what they did that you wish they could improve upon, or ask them what they want or how they hurt your feelings. This is communication 101. And I don't care if you're 20, 15, 75, 40. I don't care. I'm so exhausted from this. Oh, young people are dramatic. Yeah, I can name 150-year-olds off the top of my head that get involved in social media fights right now. All right, this is not young people who are dramatic. This is people. People are dramatic because we are emotional and because we lose our tempers, because we get upset, because we get hurt, and we lash out because we were never taught how to express our emotions in a healthy way. So flip the script, right? Flip the script, go to therapy, read online, practice mindfulness, do whatever it takes so that you're not adding to the drama, adding to the confusion, and alienating your support people. But listen, your mileage may vary. If you want to be a screamer, Godspeed.
Quick break. Can you let us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice? It really helps us break the stigma around bipolarity. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah, and I like the way you explained that you have to coach your team and build your team. And I think the easiest way to do it, at least for me, is when I'm stable. Because that's the easiest part. Like, the people, you can really show them respect, actually, because when you ask for help, they feel good, they feel, oh, I'm important. The person's really think I can do things. And so having those conversation when you're stable, maybe doing an action plan, is really what I did for manic phase, for depression phase, and like showing them like what are your triggers, what happened when you're starting to be in the phase, and what do you want to do, and what do you want them to do. And as they Gabe, like coach them, like, okay, when I start having a depression, I want you to take me for a walk. and to come to my place, maybe like depending if it's your MVP, as you say, but take my hand maybe every day and go for a walk with me so I don't stay at home. And in the morning, I'm leaving the house before you go to work. That could be something as simple as that, which is really practical, and that can make a whole difference. And um, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but then I wanted to talk about addiction because. But do you have anything to add first?
I just want to say real quick, just to echo your sentiments of do it when you're well. The worst time to have a fire drill is when the building is on fire. And I think so often during the good times, we think that the bad times are never coming back, that we don't prepare for them. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I just, again, I think about the fire drill analogy all the time. You are absolutely right. The best time to address this is when you are stable, when you are well, when you are approaching recovery, when you're having a decent day, when things are going all right. And people are like, well, but I want to be in the moment. And since I'm in a good mood, I don't want to ruin it by bringing up unhappy stuff. And I want to say I get it. I do. I understand that. You got to pick your moments, right? Don't be, out with your friends at the restaurant, living it up and feeling really great and saying, "Hey, I want to talk to all of you about my mental health issues." Right? I get it. But listen, there are so many boring parts of the day. There just are. Schedule Sunday morning coffee. Schedule a drink after work. I don't even mean an alcoholic drink. I just mean, like, go out and have a milkshake or a coffee or a diet soda, whatever you want. Uh, but go out and sit and talk for an hour and just make it a priority. And I don't think we do. I don't think we do. Again, when the building is on fire, that's not the time to have the fire drill. And when you're in crisis, that's not the time to tell your friends what you need, because everybody's panicked. But yes, you mentioned addiction, and I am super excited about this subject because it's we tend to separate mental health and addiction just way too much. Like we don't want to combine the two. We want to pretend that they're different things. And quite frankly, and I know you haven't asked a question yet, and I just jumped up on a soapbox for no apparent reason, but the mentally ill people are sometimes mean to the addiction group, and the addiction group is sometimes mean to the mentally ill group. And I'm like, what are you doing? Really, it's like, well, I might be crazy, but I'm not a drunk. Well, I might be a drug addict, but at least I'm not nuts. It's like, what are you doing? What the hell, man? We're all suffering and struggling, and now we're attacking each other. I mean, dear Lord, we can't get out of our own way, can we? And I watch this all the time, and I'm like, wow, we need to stop this. We need to stop this now. So thank you for bringing it up, because so often they're just separated by a million miles, and that's unfortunate.
And I feel it's so much easier to point finger at each other. And it's what I think at least in France, politicians have told us that. It's like, instead of like, oh, we have to change, we have to do the hard thing. It's like the problem is them. and and it's a little bit the same what you explained, Gabe. It's really like, yeah, no, the problem is not the other group. Most of the time, and I feel that the hard truth, the problem is ourselves. It's like we haven't prepared enough. We haven't coached our team well. We haven't took our pills. We haven't did our sport. And and even if we do everything well, maybe we will relapse. But it's like we have to try, actually. And and I know that and it's tough. And I think it's important to say it. But if you're trying, you will reduce, of course, the chance of going back to this like depression hole, and or just reduce the intensity. That's also, or the length. Just like, even if you go back to depression, maybe it's going to be 2 months instead of 6 months. Maybe those 2 months you will be able to get out of home instead of like not being able to get out of your place and not even being able to respond to a text, like I was in the depression of mine. So and I want to go a little bit deeper into addiction, because I know that we are much more addictive to general population. Because for me, it was smoking weed to reduce some of my symptoms. And in the short term, it kind of worked for a few days. And then you get the long-term effect of the drugs, which is usually getting things much worse. And I feel still a lot of people are believing that, for example, smoking weed could be helping them. So what do you tell them, Gabe?
I think we have to look at data. The first thing is listen, if you honestly believe that X, Y, or Z, whether it's alcohol, illicit drugs, marijuana, etc., if you honestly believe that they are treating your mental health issues and you are living well with zero problems, then the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, Godspeed. If it's truly working for you and you have zero complaints in life, you've got everything that you want, you're holding down a great job, you're living well, you're not depressed, and there's no issues, then hey, who am I to tell you, right? Now I will say that that doesn't mean that you should tell other people to do it, right? Just because something works for you doesn't mean that it works in the aggregate. And I can tell you that the data does not support that marijuana is a frontline treatment for bipolar disorder. And, I want to be very clear. I'm not telling you not to smoke marijuana. I'm telling you that if you're telling me that you are suffering from the effects of bipolar disorder or serious and persistent mental illness, and you are treating it with something that has been, proven time and time again to make matters worse, I'm questioning your thought process here. And I would say the exact same thing if you told me that you were treating it with broccoli or a healthy diet. If you told me, "Hey, I live with bipolar disorder and I spend 2 hours a day in the gym, I only drink water and I'm vegan." I would say, "Okay, and how are you doing?" "Oh, terrible. I'm constantly depressed and manic and I can't hold down a job and my significant other left me and I'm getting evicted from my apartment." And I would say, "Okay, but then that healthy lifestyle is not working to treat your bipolar disorder." And everybody's like, "So are you encouraging them not to live a healthy lifestyle?" No, I'm encouraging them to find a treatment that works. And I am so fascinated, and I cannot state this more plainly. The cannabis industry is a multi-billion dollar industry. And people are like, "Well, I trust it because it's natural." Okay, but why don't you trust the pharmaceutical industry? "Oh, they're greedy and all they care about is the money." Okay, but you've just swapped $1 billion industry for the other. And people are like, "But it's natural." So is strychnine. That'll kill you. So is water. I'm not going to hold you underwater for 10 minutes though, or you'll die. But according to you, since water is healthy, then I should be allowed to just drown you, I guess. I don't it we gotta think reasonably. And again, I want to be clear for anybody listening. If you can smoke marijuana and you get benefit from it and it is not hurting you, then Godspeed. I am not shaming alcohol. I am not shaming marijuana. I'm not shaming any of this. But I am telling you the research is clear. For most people living with bipolar disorder, it's gonna make things much worse. Both in terms of if you're trying to use it as a frontline treatment, it's not shown to have any efficacy as a frontline treatment. And two, if you are on psychiatric medications, they may well work, but they interact poorly with, alcohol and marijuana and things like that. So it might not even be marijuana's fault. It might not even be alcohol's fault. It might be the combination of the two of them. Again, there's nothing wrong with driving a car, but cars and water, not a good fit. You need a boat for that. If you don't have roads, you're better off trading in your car and getting a boat. I'm not trying to shame cars and I'm not trying to promote boats. I'm just saying you've got to make hard decisions sometimes. And, alcohol and recreational drugs may not be compatible with a healthy lifestyle for you. And you've got to make that decision. I'm all about living the best life I can. I want to be happy more than I'm sad. I want to be productive more than I'm unproductive. I want to accomplish more than I don't accomplish. I want to feel satisfied in life. And my life has shown me that alcohol and drugs are not conducive to my goals. But hey, I had an interesting 20s. I drank and smoked with the best of them, and I'm not going to lie to the audience and say that I don't have happy memories or that it wasn't fun, because that would be disingenuous. But ultimately, I found out that that was incompatible with my goals, and that's why I changed. And look, this is my favorite example because it's a sex-based example. Look, I have no problem with people who wanna have sex with, dozens of partners. It's your life. You can do whatever you want. Have as much sex as you want. But if you commit to a person and agree to be monogamous and that's the deal to be in a relationship with them, then you've got to give up all that other sex. So I hope you've sowed your wild oats. And I think that we as a culture understand that. It's like, oh, you should have seen me in my 20s, man. But well, what happened? Oh, I met the one. I settled down. They tamed me. I decided that, I could date a whole bunch of people, or I could marry my best friend. Right? We've all heard those stories and we think they're sweet. So, hey, experiment with all the drugs and alcohol you want, but at some point, you might have to commit to a healthier lifestyle so that you can, commit to the one, which in this case happens to be you. But, Godspeed, do what you want. I can't stop you.
And for me, it's about accepting that drugs that don't have the same effect. Because um I remember like I was partying in Paris, so going to clubs with friends, and yeah, we were going out drinking, and basically they could manage better than I did, because the side effect of the drug and the addiction were not wired in the same way, because I have an addiction tendency personally. So when I use a drug, the next day I feel worse. So the fact that I want to use it even more, and I want to compensate at some point my phase is using this drug, because the drug can also start me into, like, for example, a manic phase. So if I consume alcohol when I start to be a little bit like, for me, more hypomanic, so at the beginning of the phase, I know it's a trigger, and then it can lead to a manic phase. And my friend don't have the same consequence. So it's also about accepting that we are different, at least most of us. And the industry, when, for example, the weed industry, when they do their ads, they're not thinking about that. They're just telling everyone what they want to tell, but they're not saying, hey, if you're bipolar, maybe it's different for you. And so ask yourself this question, I would say, is like, um, are you different? Do you think the effect will be the same for you than from other people? And yeah, I think it's really the question. How do you manage the that do you still consume a bit of alcohol? How do you manage around friend? Because I think it's always difficult, like having those conversations sometimes. When you're like in France, we it's really common. You always have wine during like family big dinners, and everybody, when your glass is empty, they pour you wine. And I had to explain to the whole family, like having this talk of like, hey, don't do it. Like if I want wine, I will ask, but I don't want you to pour wine in my glass without me without asking me, because culturally was it's deeply there. And so what is your trick? For me, was this having this conversation with the family, but how do you do it?
Yeah, so I mean, for you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes the best advice is the simple advice. Let your family know in advance. Hey, I'm not drinking anymore, and I need all of your help. I want to make lifestyle changes, and it is important that I do not drink. Please do not offer me alcohol. Give me alcohol. And in fact, if you're close with your friends and family, say, and if I ask for it, tell me no. Tell me that you won't give it to me. And that's an advanced move, and you've got to decide who you are. But the next thing is I'm really into, and this is where I'm glad that like coffee kind of became a thing. When I was a kid, coffee was just coffee, right? You had black, cream, and sugar were pretty much your choices, right? I mean that's it. And then coffee became bougie. Right, we had lattes and americanas and and we don't even have large, we have venti, right? I mean, coffee became fancy. And a lot of bars have fancy coffee. And I only point this out because you can still participate in the culture without the alcohol. So, everybody orders, a screwdriver, a grasshopper, a sex on the beach, a Jack and Coke, a vodka, and you order, a frappe. And they come out in fancy glasses and fancy mugs, and everybody is just kind of drinking their bougie drink, their overpriced expensive drink, and yeah, yours has no alcohol in it, but who cares? It still costs $9, right? It still took a team of mixologists and experts to put it together. I I think that sometimes we have to remember why we started drinking. And for me, it's just because that's what everybody else was doing. I didn't actually make a conscious decision. I was just at a bar watching the game and everybody else was drinking. So I mimicked their behavior. Right. Well, then I started, going to the bar and drinking other things, non-alcoholic things. And my friends, they didn't care. In fact, my friends got really excited when I stopped drinking because now I was the permanent designated driver. I was always the one who picked everybody up, and they're like, and it wasn't a, I didn't draw the short straw this time. It wasn't a bummer. They felt really confident that, hey, Gabe's the guy. Gabe will drive us. And that made me feel like valued and important. And and again, I'm not saying that there were no bumps in the road. I'm not saying that I never missed it. I'm not saying that I never like had withdrawal, because all of that would be disingenuous and a lie. Yes, it's like when you're dieting. Sometimes you want the cheesecake, but you remind yourself that, listen, if I skip the cheesecake and eat a better snack, I will lose weight and have a healthier lifestyle and have a better body image and be able to run up steps without losing my breath, and that's a good trade. I had to say that from time to time and time and time and time and time again. But I will say what eventually happened is the new habits formed, right? And you mentioned like you walk in and they automatically pour you a glass of wine. Well, after you've said no to the wine, you've put up the boundary, and yeah, those are some awkward conversations, some awkward times, and some difficult, but eventually they get it, right? When I walk in, people hand me Diet Coke. They just do it automatically, right? If my dad walks in, they hand him a beer because my dad drinks beer, right? If my mom walks in, they hand her tea because she drinks tea. They're just we've all adjusted to this, and they're doing it on muscle memory, right? I think that's the last thing that I want to say. The reason that they gave you wine is not because they think that you should drink. It's because they love you and they think that they're doing something that you want. Once you tell them that that's not what you want, and you help show them what you want. Remember the coaching? Coach them to what you want and say, yeah, for a long time I wanted wine. For a long time I wanted beer. But you know what? Now I want bougie coffee, or now I want sparkling cider, or now I want tea, or now I want soda. And that's that part of that open and honest communication. That said, I do want to throw another thing up, especially for people who are really going through withdrawal, really suffering, etc. Maybe the bar is not the right place to hang out, and I know that's tough because your friends probably still want to go to the bar, but now you can't go because you're trying to make better choices, etc. And those are tough days. Those are tough days, especially with social media, to see everybody taking those pictures at the club, to see everybody getting bottle service, to see everybody at the local sports bar watching the big game, and you're sitting at home alone. And I just want to acknowledge that I know that's hard. That's really, really hard. And it takes a long time to get over that, but you gotta see a brighter future. You've got to see better habits. And when you're stronger, you can try to ease back into that scene as a sober person and see if you can handle it. But I don't want to just be like, oh, here's a whole bunch of things to try, and here's a whole bunch of reasons it doesn't matter, and it's really easy. No, it's really hard. It's really hard, and I would be lying to you if I didn't say I cried myself to sleep several nights because I missed out on things, or I felt like a third wheel, or I felt like I didn't belong. And those were some horrible, horrible, horrible experiences. But it was worth it in the end. And I believe it will be worth it for everybody listening too. But when you find yourself going through hell, the best thing that you can do is keep going. Keep going. And I believe you can do it.
Yeah, it's a well said thing. And so, if you have a magic one, what would you change in mental health, Gabe?
I really think that the amount of education surrounding mental health and mental illness is so terribly lacking. So many people believe that all mentally ill people have to do is be med compliant and they'll be fine. They don't understand how medication works. They believe that recovery is measured in days and weeks instead of months and years, and really recovery is measured in years. I say months and years, but it's not months and years. It's years. It takes years to get over serious and persistent mental illness. But most people all around the world believe that you can have a mental health crisis, you can get to a doctor, and then a couple of weeks later it's over. It's not. If I had that same magic wand, I would make mental health care much, much, much more accessible. I can only speak for the states, but depending on your ability to pay, you can wait upwards of 6 months to see a mental health practitioner. So can you imagine if you have a crisis, you are sick, and you are ready, willing, and able to get help? You are ready. You are ready. You are accepting your illness, you admit there's a problem, and you will do whatever it takes to get better. And they're like, "Great, you can start in 6 months." What do you mean I can start in 6 months? And people hear that and they're like, "Whoa." But be honest, take 6 months out and replace it with 2 weeks, and that's still a long time. You are sick. You are suffering. And somebody tells you that the first chance that you have to have that alleviated is 2 weeks? That alone kind of hits hard, right? And it's months. People are waiting months to see psychiatrists. And what happens is they devolve. They get sicker. It turns out when you have a mental illness that's not being treated, you get sicker, and then they end up getting picked up by law enforcement. They end up having a horrible crisis. They end up dying by suicide. They end up inpatient, committed to psychiatric hospitals, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, why couldn't they do any better?" Because you made them wait. You made them wait. And then that goes back to the education because if you heard that somebody was in a car accident, right? And the emergency responder showed up while you were laying on the side of the road and said it'll be 2 weeks before we can help you, everybody would be outraged. They would be, "You left a car accident victim on the side of the road for 2 weeks? What is wrong with you?" But yet we hear this in mental health. We hear people are suffering, they're in crisis, they're desperate. And we hear that they had to wait 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months, and we're just like, "That's okay. Nothing's wrong here. Nothing to see here, no problem." And then in fact, we blame the person for not getting better. So that's why I say there's systemic changes that I would absolutely make if I had the magic wand. But the fact that nobody is outraged by this shows me how little education and understanding we have surrounding mental health issues. Because honestly, people should be furious. This is unacceptable on every level. And yet, nobody's even angry about it. Not like as a societal level. And I think we need a huge culture shift in this way.
Thanks a lot for your time, Gabe. It was great having you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved it. I hope all of your listeners will check out my book, Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. I hope that they will listen to the podcast, the Inside Bipolar podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms. You can also check me out on my website, gabehoward.com. I'm sure you will put all of this in the show notes, but please stalk me, email me, follow me, listen to me. And if you hated me, I'm sorry, man. I'll try harder next time.
No, awesome. No, great. Thanks a lot. Do you still have like 1 minute to do like rapid
Yeah.
yes and no question?
Yep. Sure do.
Awesome. Does humor help you stay stable?
Yes.
Is bipolarity harder to manage than people think?
Yes. Much harder.
Is stability something you achieve once and for all?
No, it's constant work.
Would you redo your whole journey if it meant never being bipolar?
That's a tough one. I think I would. I really do. Bipolar disorder has taken more than it has given. It really has. It's an illness, and I'm really happy that I didn't die from it. But one, I'm still alive, so it's still lingering. It I don't know. Living with bipolar disorder is kind of like walking around with a grenade in your pocket, and everybody's like, "Well, hey, as long as you keep that rubber band tight, it won't explode." I know, but Other people don't have to walk around with a grenade in their pocket with a rubber band around it. And maybe I'd like to be them. So I think I would do it over again. And hey, who knows what could happen? But that, I've seen It's a Wonderful Life. That could be a terrible idea.
Do you think stigma is getting better?
I think that it's getting better, but marginally. I don't want to knock the improvements because they do exist and they are out there. But I think that we need to understand that we are really, really, really far behind. If you need $10,000 and suddenly you raise 2,000, that's a huge improvement. And nobody would deny that going from 0 to 2,000 shows real growth and ability. But you're $8,000 away from your goal. I wouldn't pat yourself on the back just yet. You've got a long way to go. We have a long way to go.
Is medication the most misunderstood part of treatment?
I think it is absolutely the most misunderstood part. I think that people have no idea how it works, what it does, how many you need, how many you don't need, its long-term effects, managing side effects. I think people think that it's this innocuous magic pill that all you have to do is take it and suddenly you'll be well. And nothing could be further from the truth. But that's what people believe, and that's how it's portrayed on TV, movies, pop cultures, books, everywhere. Yes, medicine is horrifically misunderstood.
Can you spot a mood episode in like minutes?
I wouldn't say minutes. I mean, sometimes I think that I have a higher success rate now that I've been managing it for 25 years than I did at the beginning. But it's not a lock. Sometimes it gets past me, and I want to believe that it doesn't. But I've needed people to point it out to me before. And I will need people to point it out to me again. So I think it's important to have good people in your corner who you trust who can kinda, help you be vigilant.
Have you even, sorry, have you ever hidden your diagnosis to protect yourself?
Yes. I hid it for a couple of years, and it felt really crummy, and I'm glad I don't do it anymore, but I gotta tell you, I'd be lying if I didn't say that sometimes I wonder why I chose life on the hard level. I just my life would be so much easier if I didn't have the stigma and discrimination of bipolar disorder hanging over my head. And the only reason that I have it hanging over my head is because I ran my damn mouth. If I would have kept my mouth shut, nobody would know because, again, when I walk down the street, nobody says, there's that bipolar guy. No, they say, there's that guy. I don't look bipolar. I just look like a middle aged man. But when people find out about it, they know, and when they know, they know.
Do you believe most people have no idea what mania feels like?
I think that Mania has the best public relations team in the world. People think that Mania it must be great, right? Like it must feel good, or it must be awesome, or it has no downside, etc. It's incredibly misunderstood, and somehow it manages to skate all negative consequences. I just whenever Mania ruins my life, I become depressed, and then I'm like, damn depression. Yeah, but I'm depressed because mania ruined my life. Why am I not blaming mania? But mania's like, wasn't me. I didn't do it. That's depression's fault. That's bipolar's fault. Mania was good, remember? And I'm like, oh, it was. No, mania is bullshit. Mania is terrible. Terrible. I don't think the average person understands that.
Is there a right way to talk about bipolarity?
I don't think so. I think the right way is however it is most meaningful to you. The only asterisk that I'll put on that is it is wrong to speak for other people. I would never say everybody with bipolar disorder feels like X or Mark has bipolar disorder and I agree that he is Y. No, it's Mark's journey. So I think that sometimes people say things and people are like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that my life, my experiences were up for debate. I didn't realize this was like a group activity. I thought the way that I felt and my emotions and my feelings and my deeply held opinions and beliefs were my own. But thank you for finding out that I have bipolar disorder and then lecturing me on how I should feel. I feel so empowered. And I think we need to accept that because I see too much policing of language, discussion, context, etc. And I'm not saying that there's never an intervention, but I'm saying that more often than not, especially in public forums, I'm just like, leave them alone. That's how they feel. They're being vulnerable. They're being honest. They're telling you the truth, and you're trying to shut that down. What's wrong with you? Stop it. Stop it. We need to connect on a real level, and that's their real feelings. And I think that has beauty, and I think we need to cherish that a little more.
To learn more about bipolarity, go to our website upstage.com, HOPESTAGE.com. See you soon.